1, 2, 3. Yep.
Is that green? Hey, Josh, 30 seconds. Good evening and welcome to Prior Lake City Hall and your Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Board meeting for Tuesday, March 14th. You'll see that we've got a little lighter crowd this evening. We've got a couple of board members who are out of town and unable, therefore, to be in attendance at the meeting. Nonetheless, we have a quorum, and with a quorum under state law and our bylaws, we can continue to conduct business. And I'm standing in for President Loney, and hopefully at least I'll do an acceptable job. With that, would you stand with me so we can recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we normally have a section of our meeting where public comment is welcome. Interested if anyone has signed up to speak this evening? Any comments? No? No? All right, we will move along as a result. First step, gentlemen, is to approve the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda as proposed or with amendments?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I've already made my first rookie mistake. Staff, are there any amendments that you are seeking in the agenda?
Manager Boyles, if you would like to add a discussion about the PLOC funding
Okay.
request,
Where would you put that?
4.5.
add item 4.5.
4.5. Is that acceptable to the motioner and the seconder?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. I apologize for that. Thank you very much, Johnny. Appreciate that. All those in favor of the once amended agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, we're done with that. Other old and new business programs and project update.
All right. For the projects and programs update, March 14th, we'll start with going almost back to the February board meeting. 2 days later, we conducted a carp seining event in the northwest corner of Spring Lake. Don Geyer and crew netted around 11,763 pounds of carp. All our successful seine factors lined up on that date. At the same time, we've been monitoring carp locations in Prior Lake. These locations in that lower left photo, they're in a tough spot, typically where commercial netters don't want to seine. So district staff and WSP staff have been working on alternative methods to attempt to remove carp there. Jumping back into the seine on Spring Lake, this removed around 22 kilograms per hectare, or around 17.5% of our goal to reach 100 kilograms per hectare. So a significant portion of our carp population in the lake was removed, as well as returning what we felt like was a very healthy abundance of native game fish. So great to see that in our lakes. The Prior Lake American wrote a great article on our efforts and the district's progress towards carp management. So happy to see that. In Upper Prior Lake, due to some of the limitations with commercial netting and the bathymetry of the lake, we've been attempting to use gill netting, which is approved through our DNR permit, to remove carp in these locations. All those dots are, we have 8 tags in that location. So this, what you're seeing there is 2 actual tracking events that show up in that, that survey and that left-hand photo. So we were out yesterday and removed only 15 to 20 carp in our efforts, but you know, it's a learning process and it's tough. So hats off to the commercial netters on Spring Lake, and we'll continue to keep working at removing carp in Upper Prior Lake. So this winter still has more to give, it looks like, and we'll still keep shooting for, you know, more removal events. Other actions that district staff have been working on has our 2 summer interns have accepted the position as of today. Meetings have begun with SWCD on taking on our permitting program, conservation easement inspections, acquisition, and MS4 compliance. We've also been working with, coordinating with volunteers for our camp monitoring program, partnering with the U of M on carp management, and finding volunteers for AAS eDNA testing on Lower Prior Lake. So the U of M is going to be looking for new methods at early detection. So they've asked that we help with volunteer outreach for that.
Okay, I've got my own mouse and a microphone. So I just wanted to start on this slide. I know there's a lot of words on there, and that's the point, to just notice that we have a lot of projects going on. So there's a lot of details to keep straight and many factors at play here. But I will walk you through. I guess my mouse doesn't work. Thanks. Great. Beautiful. So the first area I'll start is Sutton Lake management, or Sutton Lake in general. I talked about Sutton Lake management plan in the board workshop, so I won't go too into detail in that, but we'll be revising the plan based on DNR comments, and you should see that in the board meeting in April with updated plan. I've also been working with Carl on looking at some alternate sites for a Sutton Lake iron enhanced sand filter and following up on concerns of the initially proposed site. So there's some momentum there, and we'll have some follow-up meetings at the end of March. So that's moving forward, and we'll see what our best path forward is there as we move on. Oh, interesting. Okay. The Spring West area has 2 different projects proposed. One is a wetland project. I did meet with one of the landowners, and I'll continue to do outreach to reach the other landowner on the wetland, depending on the willingness and cost effectiveness of working with those landowners and the competing land interests will determine our next steps and what I bring back to you all. The second project is an iron enhanced sand filter. That project is really at the stage of meeting with landowners, and they, majority of them have been on vacation. So still continuing on. That project will also require some coordination with the county and roadway realignment as well. Another project that continuing to make progress on is Buck East Wetland. So we'll be doing some follow-up monitoring work in the following season to address some concerns that landowners, or questions that landowners had, and also doing some digging into other questions that we can answer prior to field season, like how does this impact flood insurance? So Those are really good questions that have been coming up, and in general, really great meetings with landowners on the projects I've met with. So we also received the comments from DNR on the draft plan for the Buck wetland, and so that will be coming forward in April, as long as we don't have too much back and forth with DNR on their comments, and we can move forward with that and approving that. I am also working with Jeff to build a RFP to request proposals for a ferric chloride treatment system analysis, assessment. What is the lifetime left on our current system? Are there improvements that we should consider? And what would that look like to improve our efficiency and timeline of that? So that RFP will be drafted in the near term. Additionally, we have as of last meeting, formalized a grant agreement with Bowser to get funding through the Watershed-Based Implementation Fund. That will fund partially 2 projects. One is a Swamp Lake phosphorus and peak flow reduction, which is likely to be an iron-enhanced sand filter. That wording is based on guidance from the grant manager to keep the wording broad in case another best management practice suits, and we'll start that work with the consultant to kick it off on April 26th, and then the first step is really to wait until field conditions allow for wetland delineation. So that will, we'll see when winter ends and get that one kicked off. The second project is Fish Lake Management Plan update. Again, waiting for field conditions allow to collect data. And that data collection will really inform when we can collect that data, will inform when we can start meeting with landowners and other stakeholders to get their feedback on what that means for the direction we want to take our lake management there. I will also be continuing to work on flood reduction projects and have worked on them in the last month. I was able to, by extension or directly, meet with landowners from both Project 6 and 1, and we'll continue to meet with landowners there to understand interests or disinterests in the projects, as well as looking at other opportunities as they arise, like mentioned in the board workshop. We did submit a grant application to Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. That was done in January at this point, and we have not heard back. Their grant website indicates that the timeline would have announced awardees, but there's not awardees announced. So we're hoping no news is good news, but that has not been, we haven't been told if we're a winner or loser yet there. But I will continue to work with landowners to understand their interests. I also developed a proposal for PLOC pipelining with people at the PLOC cooperators table. That was, bids were solicited in early March, I believe, and those proposals are due this Friday at close of business. So I'm hopeful that we'll receive some good submissions, and that the timeline we proposed on that is quite aggressive. We asked bidders to submit a timeline that is feasible for them with their capacity. So we will see what we receive, and excited for that option as a flood reduction tool. Any questions on?
Any questions, managers?
No.
Not whatsoever? Mr. Morkenberg?
Yes, so impressive list of activities from both of you. Thank you for the carp seining. And I just wanted to, just briefly, I spoke to the commercial fisherman, and he mentioned that one of the problems with this particular seine was that that part of the net got caught up just in a little piece of old Christmas tree. And because of that, you had to go back, lift up the lake, and probably because of that, we lost a number of carp. And he talked about is like typically these could be things that are actually put into the lake for the fish to congregate around and therefore improve the fishing. And he says the best time to screen for that is in the fall. So maybe we can, in the fall, identify our preferred carp seining areas and maybe scan them in the fall to see if we can avoid this. Because we could maybe have caught, like, I don't know how much more, it's just a speculation. But thank you for being out there. The other thing he said is if the ice is okay, we might be able to come back. And I know, Jeff, you said that that may be an option. So if they congregate the right way, and go for it if you can, please. And to you, Emily, it's like impressive to see what in a very short amount of time you already are doing with all these projects, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you.
I've got two questions. One, this probably is a stupid one, but how do we determine how many carps we tag? And I suppose the answer is by the number of tags we have. What's the real reason? Or the real way? Is there some sort of ratio?
It's based on our capacity to track them in a relative amount of time that we felt is reasonable.
Gotcha.
Too few tags can't always determine an aggregation.
Yep.
Too many, it would just it would take us too much time to, search for them. So we found that 10 in a given water body is about right. The tags last around 2 years, so that also gives us, if the tag dies early, we'll still have a fair number to determine a aggregation.
And the seines that are proving that out, because you're pulling the tags back off of those. And
Yes. So we also, during this last seine, we pulled out 3 additional tags that were from previously. The tags that were dead, the batteries were dead, but they were in carp from previous tagging years.
Sure.
So we'll have that data to look at along with the pit tags.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then with respect to the contractors who appear to be interested in our PLOC RFP, any sense? 3, 5, 10, 0?
We solicited bids directly from 3 contractors.
Okay.
And I have heard back from at least 2 that they're interested. I did have heard concerns about ability to meet our ideal timeline, and I expressed again, it's ideal, please submit. And
can.
yeah,
Right?
so we'll see what we get.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Any other questions there? All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, 4.2, our 2022 aquatic plant survey results. We have Steve McComas here. Come on up. You're not shy. I know that.
Appreciate it. And good day, everybody. Let's see here, I think. I should know how to work these things. We turn it on right about here, and we're up and running.
Terrific.
Good. Good afternoon. Thanks. It's always a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it. I'm Steve McComas. I did bring along a colleague, Connor, because he was doing a lot of the survey work as well. We got into some of these lakes. There's only room. It was a one-person kayak, and Connor got the nod, and so he will be in best position to talk about some of those aspects. So let's get going here. Here is our set of projects, a set of our aquatic plant survey lakes for the year, and the main lakes, and then some of the very nice small natural environment lakes as well. For the first couple of lakes that we're going to talk about, it's Prior Lake and Spring Lake. So we did curlyleaf pondweed delineations and assessments, and then we did point intercept surveys on those 2 lakes as well. The challenge always is for curlyleaf is that you have to delineate it early in the year before it reaches its peak biomass. And so we have to assume that if you have 4 or 5 stems per rake, that's going to be a problem in another month. So those are circled up for treatment. And if it's only 1 stem, you can let that go. That's probably going to only generate a light growth. So we don't treat all curlyleaf. We're going to treat try to treat the most problematic areas of heavy curly-leaf pondweed. So Spring Lake, here's our delineation in 2022. So we're out on April 29th, and you can see that we had really only had one area that we designated for treatment. That was about 8 acres in that southwest lobe down there. We had some other curly-leaf around the lake, but we didn't treat it. And so then we treated those 8 acres, and we wanted to come back and see, as an assessment, one, did we get good control in that area, and secondly, did we miss some, and it kind of surprised us. Well, if we look at Spring Lake in April, and then we go over to June, that is their peak curly-leaf growing period. And there is very good control in the treated area, and only a few spots of light curly-leaf growth the rest of the lake. So this year, in 2022, we had a good delineation, a good treatment, and our assessment showed very good control. So that was nice to see. Staying with Spring Lake, it hasn't always been that easy. Here's 2000, and I was out on the lake then. This is about as thick of curly-leaf as you'll see, 700-800 stems per meter squared. And these days, it's a lot less than that. Starting in about 2002, for 5 years, we set up some areas where we were doing herbicide treatments in one area, and then harvesting in the other area, to kind of compare techniques and methods to see what was going to be the best approach. Turns out that herbicides were still a little bit more efficient and a little bit cheaper, and we didn't see a lot of environmental problems. So we said from here on in, maybe herbicides would be okay. However, what happened for the next 7-8 years, from 2007 to 2015, there wasn't enough curly-leaf to treat in Spring Lake, so we didn't treat it. However, starting in 2016, we have been using herbicides, contact herbicides, for treating curly-leaf pondweed, and these are the hot spots. So we put all our treatment areas that we've looked at for the last 7-8 years onto this map, and you can see there's pretty much a pattern there. It varies a little bit from year to year, but the pattern is pretty well established for curly-leaf pondweed in those areas. Here's a summary of what we've done for harvesting and for herbicides. And these days, in the last few years, we've been between 8 to 22, 23 acres. And with this year coming up, 2023, I'd predict fairly light curly-leaf growth just because our snow cover, and I'm assuming ice out might be a little bit delayed as well. That bodes well for a lighter density of curly-leaf, but never, that's just, it's a prediction. Eurasian water milfoil, EWM, first showed up in 2021, and working with Wes and the Spring Lake Association in conjunction with the Watershed District, did a very aggressive job of hitting almost all the milfoil we saw in 2021, and that was fairly successful. And then we came back in 2022, and milfoil was present. In June, it was present at a couple areas, and again, being fairly aggressive, treated both those areas, about 14 acres. Then we went back in September to look at, kind of make an assessment of the Eurasian milfoil. And what we found is, one, we had very good control. Those black dots represent sample sites, but no milfoil. And in the treatment areas, very good control. And although there was a couple green dots in that south end and a little bit up on the north end, green dots represent very light growth, maybe only a few stems at a site. So we ended in 2022 on a fairly good note for Eurasian water milfoil. Also, because of the effort and the finances involved with alum treatments in Spring Lake, we do kind of want to track we're tracking aquatic plants, and of course water quality is being monitored as well. What we found in 2022 with our point intercept survey, that we had plants growing to about 9 feet, and what is a nice result is that we have 15 different species of aquatic plants. That's a very good diversity for a lake in this part of the state, this part of the county, and everything else. So that is fairly good news. If we look back at previous point intercept surveys going to 2015 and forward, we can see that our aquatic plant coverage has varied a bit. It peaked in 2021 at 34% coverage of the entire lake basin, and in 2022, down there on the lower right, it dropped off a few percentage points, but still have very good coverage or fairly good coverage. Plant depths in 2022, we found plants growing to about 9 feet deep, whereas the year before we found them to 12 feet. So they're going to be dependent, plant growth, on water clarity, because that will dictate how deep the plants can grow. The better clarity we have, the better coverage we have in a lot of cases. So just kind of summarize those depths. We're finding it's been 8 feet in 2019, for example, 2018, 2019, 12 feet in 2021, 9 feet in 2022. Prior to these point-intercept surveys, plant growth was probably only out to 5 to 6 feet. So we've had a nice improvement, along with that, a good increase in the amount of species. Yeah, question?
Yes, so thank you for all your service. And I just want to mention, I remember about 10, 15 years ago, I was out with you on Prior Lake and Spring Lake. And I remember it was striking to see the difference between Lower Prior Lake, which was a beautiful plant community, and we came down to Spring Lake where there was almost no plant growing.
That's right.
And the water was unclear and green. And you were talking about this, and now here, 10, 15 years later, with a lot of water quality improvement efforts, we are seeing a real effort. And I think you said to us, once we get up at, what was it, 35 to 40%,
Yeah.
the plants will help maintain the clarity of the lake. Is that correct? Or?
That would be the goal. A good goal for aquatic plant coverage is about 40%. And then with that, you can sustain good water clarity because the plants help keep the water clear. They pull out phosphorus. The attached algae growth helps pull out the phosphorus, and then you can sustain that growth. So we're not quite at 40% yet, but we're better than we were. And here's just a graph of our species richness, the number of species that we find in these surveys going back to the 40s. We've always been around 4 or 5 species or more. Never had dipped much below that, but in the last few years we've had a nice increase in number of species, which allows a good potential coverage, because if one species goes down, we got another species to be there to take its place, more or less. So the seed bank is good and the diversity is good. In Prior Lake, we've been checking curly-leaf pondweed for a number of years as well, and in 2022 we did treat 10 acres in both Upper and Lower Prior Lake. And then we went back and did our assessment, and we had good control in the areas that were treated. We did find a few patches, those red dots would indicate some heavier curly-leaf growth. So some of that curly-leaf grew up after we had done our delineation, but relatively small areas, those circles are not to scale. So it looks, you know, the dots are big, but the actual patches are relatively small. But we did find some hitting the surface. And here is kind of our hotspot map for 7-8 years of curly-leaf control. And what we find is that there's a pattern there. Not much in that eastern side of Lower Prior. Mud Bay, Mud Lake has typically been sustaining some pretty good growth, and down there in the lower southwest end, we have some curly-leaf growth too, almost on an annual basis. Here is a Prior Lake summary, both upper and lower, and it's varied from a high of about 43 acres, and one year in 2018, we didn't treat at all. So it does have some variability. It varies from year to year, largely based on temperature, sunlight, snow cover, ice out. We did some additional work. We were looking at Eurasian water milfoil. One thing we noticed in Prior Lake, especially Upper Prior, seems to be an increase in Eurasian water milfoil. It's kind of coming back. It was big in the mid 90s and took a little break. But notice that most of those dots are green and yellow. So it's fairly widespread, but at light to moderate growth. We have a few red spots, but so milfoil might be expanding or increasing in Lower Prior, but not as much of a serious problem. It's probably doing the same thing in Upper Prior. So here is our results of our of our Lower Prior Lake Point Intercept Survey. We had good coverage, and one thing that is striking is finding aquatic plants growing to 20 feet of water depth. And that is fairly significant from the standpoint that, one, it's good water quality, and it's fairly rare in the metro area. There aren't many lakes that will have plants growing to that depth. So Lower Prior, from that standpoint, as well as the number of species and the good aquatic plant coverage, is it still in very good shape, Lower Prior. We're finding up to 5 species per site in some of these sample points. So that's excellent news. Well, we also did several other aquatic plant point intercept surveys. Those point intercept surveys, I remember, are where you put a grid on the lake and then you travel each point on the grid. They're 50, 60 meters apart, and you sample there. That's what we mean by point intercept surveys. I helped with Fish Lake, but these other lakes, again, that was that one-person kayak with a sonar mounted there and rakes, and that was a one-person operation. Connor has has firsthand experience on that. I thought I'd turn it over to him and let him talk about the remaining point intercept surveys that we did in some of these smaller, shallower lakes. Connor, come on up. Here's this thing. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. Connor McComas here, filling in for Steve for the second half here. So, like Steve was saying, these are some lakes that we were doing some point intercept plant surveys on. And starting with Fish Lake, we also did some delineations and assessment, similar to like we've done in Spring Lake and the prior lakes. In Fish Lake in 2022, we did our early season April survey and as well as a June survey. In April, curly leaf was very light. We only found a handful of sites with curly leaf, so there was no treatment conducted. However, we did, it's kind of interesting to do a follow-up study to kind of see how things turned out without any treatments, and we found a few more areas of curly leaf pondweed growth, but nothing that would rise to the level of actually taking control or management purposes on that lake. So curly leaf, while it's been variable over the years, we're kind of in a trend here for Fish Lake where not much control or management is needed. So we did that in April and June, and then we came back in August and did a full lake point intercept survey to look at the entire plant community in the summer to see how that kind of developed over the course of the summer. We found 6 plant species in the lake, fairly diverse community, kind of on the upper range of what we have seen in previous years. It certainly is not degrading. We're seeing plants all the way around the lake for the most part, which is great to see again. Some of these areas are areas where curly leaf pondweed once grew pretty heavily and is now at a lower density overall. But we are seeing some nice plant diversity, some good aquatic plant species coming in there, which is good to see. Plants were growing out to 8 feet, and coontail was a dominant species with some flat stem as well as water celery coming in as well. So moving on to another lake here, Arctic Lake, which is a kind of a smaller lake. We've been on this lake a number of years, kind of tracking the plant growth, and it's been pretty much consistently low diversity of plants, low abundance of aquatic plants. The lake does have some algae blooms growing, so we have some challenges from the standpoint of the clarity is not great in August, so we're not seeing a lot of aquatic plant growth. The lake is a challenge because it actually is more of a deeper lake than a shallow lake. It has quite significant drop-offs, so the aquatic plant growth around the lake is not necessarily a robust growth there. Over the years, we've only seen a handful of species, but this lake could be in line for either some more project work potentially. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but the algae in the lake might be limiting the overall aquatic plant growth in Arctic Lake here. Moving on kind of here to Haas Lake. another lake. This is another paddle lake, of course. We have a max depth of about 6 feet. In Haas Lake in 2022, there was only one submerged species found, and that was coontail. Not a very diverse community of plants, but very robust growth, and that does, in effect, help our water quality overall. It's good to have some sort of plant growth to aid our water quality goals out here. Haas Lake has really good nature viewing opportunities with paths and floating docks on the lake, so it's good for habitat viewing, as well as good native wetland species around the lake. So that is also a benefit to the lake and for people wanting to have some wildlife viewing. Not a lot of boating or fishing out here, but it is a nice lake for wildlife viewing and that sort of thing. Rice Lake is another lake that I was paddling on this past year in 2002. Out on Rice Lake, there were 2 submerged plant species. We had that coontail, which was very common, as well as some flat-stem pondweed. Also, 2 species of lilies were present. So on the map here, we can see areas where there were up to 4 species growing, including the lilies. And the whole lake, for the most part, had something growing throughout the lake. Again, good for maintaining the sediments being intact at the bottom of the lake, as well as promoting good water quality overall, good for waterfowl, good for amphibians and other things as well. So overall, a pretty healthy lake. We always like to have that plant diversity to kind of give us the canopy and give us the understory and kind of fill out the lake, keep things in place, and promote kind of a good aquatic ecosystem out there. And kind of rounding it out here is Sutton Lake, which is always a challenge even at full water capacity. However, in 2022 in August, water levels were a little low. So these 2 pictures here on the right kind of show the entry area of Sutton Lake. And unfortunately, this little area here was the only area we were able to get to launch a boat out. And from there, I was getting stuck out there. So unfortunately, that survey was not fully completed. We did make some observational assessments out there, took a lot of pictures, looked at the plant community that we had here. Our hope is that in 2023, with the snowpack and water levels, we will be able to get back out there and see how things are going out there. But the Sutton is another lake where we have native plants completely surrounding the lake and a good kind of environment for wildlife and things of that nature. So overall, not much to report on Sutton Lake, but we were finding a number of species. Just as in passing, the water level it appears to be some water out there, but more than a couple inches down, and it gets pretty mucky or pretty silty in there. So I was actually stopped in the kayak, and I could not continue on with that survey in 2022. But it does have a lot of good native vegetation, both submerged and emergent. In the past, we've seen wild rice, burr, reed, and a whole host of other emergent plants as well. Really good for wildlife, waterfowl, and that sort of things. So we'll be on that lake again, and we'll see how things go at that point. Kind of to summarize what we've done over this past year and years before. So that the curleaf is a challenge. The growth can change based on, like Steve was saying, a number of variables that are out of our control. So it's something that we'll kind of keep tracking and keep documenting. However, we are heading in a good trend on most of our lakes for the curleaf growth and control programs. Like I was saying, in Fish Lake, it's nice to see that curleaf management is not really necessary at this time. I'm sure the homeowners and the people on the lake are also happy with that. But the aquatic plants overall are also improving, and we're getting deeper depths of colonization out there, so that's a positive step forward. Eurasian milfoil in the Prior Lakes, with the increasing water clarity, and even last couple of years with the lower water, we're seeing a little bit larger colonization of milfoil in these lakes. It's hard to tell if that'll be sustained with the increasing water levels coming back, probably a bit, but it's something to kind of keep an eye on in terms of what are the trends doing for that species there. And in Spring Lake, we had a very rich plant community, which was very nice to see. Over the years, we have been seeing an increase in those aquatic plants, and it's been we've been on the lake for a number of years, and it's been very nice to see a whole host of different aquatic plants coming in, filling the space maybe where there hasn't been plants in the past. And that's a positive step forward. And we'll keep tracking the plants out there and seeing what they're doing. And that kind of has implications for water quality and our fish communities. So that's pretty much all I had. I'd be happy to take any questions or other comments that you might.
Very nice report from both of you. Any questions from managers here? Yeah, I can.
Yes, thank you for your efforts very much. Very highly appreciated to get information and data on what's happening. I had two questions. We're doing a feasibility study for the water quality on Fish Lake. So question one would be what is your impression of the water quality on Fish Lake? And the second question that you alluded to is on Arctic Lake, we have a lot of unclarity of the water. And so you said that may be up for a treatment. And I had a thought in my mind what that could involve, but I wanted to hear if you had any suggestions on how to improve the water quality on Arctic Lake.
Good questions. So first starting with Fish Lake, I haven't looked at the overall trend of water quality out there, but we have seen some algae blooms in the later season. And while there are algae blooms, there's still enough clarity to allow plants to colonize out to 6 to 8 feet in a lot of circumstances. So I think it's in a position where it has been improving over the past few years. In terms of the overall water quality, I can't really speak to because I don't really have haven't looked at the data of the actual water quality there.
I can step in because I have a little bit more experience than Connor does. I was on Fish Lake in the 1990s, and I think it was probably a little bit better back then. It took a dip, it took a decrease in water quality, and I think Connor's right too. In the last couple of years, we've seen either stabilized, maybe improving slightly, but maybe not as good as it was back prior to a lot of maybe home construction and some other activities going on in Fish Lake.
Certainly would be worthwhile to look at all the options, though, for improving water quality. We could still have a few more feet of plant colonization and certainly room for improvement yet still on Fish Lake.
Arctic Lake?
And Arctic Lake is a challenge because it's a smaller lake and a deeper lake. So our maximum extent of plant colonization there wouldn't be necessarily very great. Now, there are a few things that the Watershed District has been doing, such as carp management and these sorts of projects. And I would probably recommend continuing with some fish management techniques in there, such as carp removal and potentially even fish stocking. It's a little bit of a deeper lake, so there could also be some opportunities for looking at the phosphorus release from the sediments in the lake, potentially. And since it is such a small lake, it would be potentially a cost-effective approach for that lake at this time. Other things to do out there, like I said, since it's a smaller lake and a deep lake, it would likely be able to sustain a fish population. Along with the carp management and removal program, it could be worthwhile to stock some predator fish for continued control of that fish community. Other than that, probably would like to keep tracking the plants. I would honestly be interested to know what it's doing in June or May and June to see how kind of it changes over the course of the summer. If we may be losing plants over the summer as the water quality kind of degrades and it gets kind of that greenish pea soup color, which is limiting the light penetration. So it's just a matter of kind of getting that light penetration and getting some more plant growth in there, ideally.
And I think when there's quite a lot of good approaches to managing the pollution that comes into the lake at Arctic Lake, a lot of good, very good approaches. The one thing that comes to my mind is if you did an alum treatment on the lake, it probably would dramatically change the in-lake pollution, capture the phosphorus there, and it would probably provide much better water quality, water clarity, and then promote the plant growth.
I agree, yes.
I think so. I'll just add, a quick rule of thumb is that a lot of times you should get plant colonization about twice your summer Secchi desk reading. So if you have a 1 foot transparency in August, you probably can only expect plant growth out to about 2 feet. However, if you can increase that transparency in the middle of the summer to 5 to 6 feet, you can get plants out to 10, 12 feet, get an increase in your plant distribution, and maybe then that they can help sustain good water quality from there on in. That'd be kind of one approach.
Your fourth summary there talks about Eurasian water milfoil spreading in Prior Lake over the last few years. Is it a cause for concern? Is it no cause at all?
I was lucky enough to be here in the 90s when it did come in and took off and was going pretty wild, then it died back down. So I think we are in kind of an oscillation, more or less. I don't think this is an ongoing increasing trend. I think it's more a blip than a long-term trend, and I suspect that it's going to be more. It'll settle down here, and like Connor mentioned, with another foot or two of water on the lake, and with the snowpack coming in, that actually will have a big dampening effect on Eurasian milfoil. And let's see if I would suspect that it's going to probably. The occurrence is probably going to decrease again.
Thank you both so much. As always, a great job. Lots of food for thought. Okay, next agenda item. There's no action we have to take there, right? Next action item is 4.3, AIS boat inspections and waterfront restorations LLC contract approval. Staff?
All right, Vice President Boyles and managers. The district started doing boat inspection activities back in 2019, and the boat inspections really are an attempt to reduce the opportunities for the introduction of aquatic invasive species into the district's most popular lakes. In December of 2022, the managers decided to discontinue the ILIDS pilot project. And at that time, staff had suggested possibly taking and reallocating the funds that were budgeted for the ILIDS project over to the boat inspection program. There was some concern expressed about that from one of the managers, and so that the decision to discontinue did not include the reallocation of the budget. So subsequent to that, and now as staff is preparing to try to establish a contract with boat inspectors for 2023, we're bringing forward 2 options for the manager's consideration. The first option in the packet includes 900 hours of boat inspection activity, which is consistent with what was the activity that was performed in 2020 and 2022. And those 900 hours could be performed with the 2023 budgeted funds for boat inspections of $28,500. Option B also includes, is based on the assumption of the reallocation of the ILIDS budget over to boat inspection activities. And with that reallocation, we could fund 1,000 hours of boat inspection activity. The staff has also prepared, and within that memo, as kind of a history of the number of hours and dollars spent with our boat activity. And one thing to note is, in 2021, we did have 1,000 hours budgeted to inspection activities. In 2022, we went down to 900 hours for the sole purpose of staying within our budgeted amount for 2022. So we entered into the contract with Waterfront Restorations, and then midway through the year realized that we had the opportunity to obtain $15,000 of state of Minnesota funding that's allocated through Scott County to offset the costs that we are expending for boat inspection activities. So with the acquisition of county reimbursement funds and grants, in 2022, our actual costs for boat inspection activities was around $9,000. So we know that we'll have that ability to go and bring in the $15,000 again for 2023. And so once again, the table shows the two options, the $28,500 with the $15,000 cost offset, and the $32,000 for 1,000 hours, once again with the 15,000 offset, both of which are less than what we were expending when we did not have county funding helping us out. So staff believes that the $1,000 hours is where we would like to shoot for amount of activity. And so staff is recommending that the Board of Managers vote to authorize the district administrator to enter into a contract with Waterfront Restorations to perform boat inspection services for 2023 at a fee of $32,000, which would include allocation of the ILID's budget to boat inspection activity.
That would be option B, correct?
That would be option B.
Any questions, gentlemen?
Yes, I'm in favor of option B. When, for 2022, the inspection hours were reduced on Spring Lake by over 100 hours because of the ILID's program's presence, if I understand that correctly. And since we no longer have the ILID's program there, I would suggest to reinstate that, and that's one reason why I vote for the option B.
Yes, Manager Morkenberg, I failed to mention that, yes, we did reduce, to stay within our budget, we did have to reduce hours by 100, and the decision was to try to reduce hours a little bit on Spring Lake because we also had the ILID's pilot project in place there.
Do we have any idea of the number of inspections that are done in an average hour? Is there any way to correlate the number of hours to the number of inspections and to the number of boats on the lake? I presume it's pretty small.
Well, Manager Boyles, it really depends on when the inspections are occurring. We really do try to use our inspectors during what we anticipate to be the heaviest use time. So most of the inspection activities are really occurring on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays when we see most boat activity. In the middle of the day is also when you see the most activity as well. There has been some attempts once in a while to maybe hit a weekend, just as boater education and awareness. But really, I guess, focusing on when we see the most boating activity is probably the best bang for the dollars spent. We also do coordinate with the DNR because the DNR also is out doing inspection activities as well. So the inspectors that we hire are in communication with the DNR so that they're not duplicating efforts at the same location at the same time.
Given that this is a private contractor, right?
Correct.
Could we merge two programs, in essence, the inspections, and we were talking earlier about education. It's an ideal time to hand out the material we think we're going to be putting together on the impact of power boats on lakes. Is that something we can do, or would that be prevented by the terms of the contract?
We have not entered into the contract yet. It's this ask is for authorize the administrator, so we certainly could ask
Sure.
and see if that is something that they're willing to do, or whether they feel that that might be undermining their intent for boat inspections.
As well ask.
We can ask.
Of course, we can make it a condition of the approval, too. But that's up to you guys. Okay, do we have a motion and second? Moved?
I will just say, Manager Boyles is I completely agree with you. I think that's a very good idea. And, and it is relevant also because it has to do with the emptying of the tanks and how they enter the lake. So especially for the wake boats, they have several areas to drain. And when they enter the lake, those areas should be open and drained, which is difficult, but that should be the goal. And two, when they come out of the lake, they should be open and drained so that they don't carry it from one lake to the other lake. So I think it's very relevant, and I think it would be excellent if we could combine the resources. And I know that speaking to President Stefan from Spring Lake Association, he's very interested if we could combine the two efforts, like they can help provide the educational pamphlet, but if they could be part of it, they would be very interested in that.
I'm guessing our net will be a reduction in the number of inspections. Naturally, they can't be doing the two things effectively at one time. So we'll see some reduction because some of it's going to be education. I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah, Manager Boyles, I believe that our inspectors are out there doing education as well as it relates to aquatic invasive species. So I believe that is part of their part as they're interacting with the boaters. Once again, focusing on aquatic invasive species. At a minimum, if level of activities become too great, another option is for us to have brochure holders, containers out at those boat launches, and also to cover times when we do not have inspectors there, and we can make some glaring sign like, here's some information, please, please take a brochure for your information.
Okay, thank you very much.
One last thing is for the boat inspections, if we could also have a few scattered boat inspections during Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just so that we occasionally will have some there, so that it's not a clear thing that there is no inspection on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Manager Morkenberg, we can do that. It is truly a much reduced amount of activity. So in terms of the amount of people that we reach at those times, just be aware that that's a trade-off that we're having.
No, but I agree, you have to be the most efficient. Thank you.
Any other comments at all? Okay, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve option B, right?
Yes, I motion to approve option B.
Very good.
Second?
Second? Very good. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes 3-0. Next, item 4.4 is Resolution 23-367, authorizing to transfer funds to the JPA/MOA fund, and that is a vote. JPA, Joint Powers Agreement. MOA, what's that?
Memorandum of Agreement.
There we go. All righty. Do you want to give us a brief background, or?
Certainly, Vice President Boyle and managers.
you.
So every year,
Guys.
there is an established budget and work tasks that cover the operations and management of the Prior Lake Outlet Channel. And those work tasks and budgets are approved by the JPA MOA cooperators for the Prior Lake Outlet Channel. And based on the funding formula that has been agreed to by all of the cooperators of the outlet channel, Prior Lake's allocation of the cost share for operations and maintenance for 2023 is $185,421. And so in the packet, there is a resolution number 23-367 authorizing the transfer of funds from the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Implementation Fund to the Prior Lake Outlet JPA MOA Fund to cover the district's cost share for the operations and maintenance of the Prior Lake Outlet Channel for 2023. So staff recommends the approval of Resolution 22-367, authorizing the transfer of funds to the JPA MOA group of funds.
Okay. And this is in accordance with our financial documents? I mean,
This
we
is-
anticipated these?
Excuse me, Manager Boyles. Yes, this dollar value is already incorporated into our approved 2023 budget. So this is right in alignment with the approved budget for
Thank you.
2023.
All right. Any discussion?
Yes, I would agree. It says PLOC contribution in our implementation fund, $185,500.
Is that a motion to approve?
Yes.
Thank you.
Second?
And second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. 3-0, that passes. We added an item to the agenda called PLOC, Prior Lake Outdoor Channel. Imagine, if you would, that you've got a 42 square mile area, 14 lakes, innumerable wetlands, etc., and much of the water, surface water in that 42 square miles goes to one place, goes to a 36-inch pipe. That pipe kind of becomes the heart or the aorta of the entire system, does it not? Well, imagine what would happen if that pipe collapsed or somehow cracked. We'd have significant problems, and that is why the Watershed District has, for I think the last 5 years, done a survey of the pipe, actually, televised the pipe, to see whether or not it's eroding, degrading, if you will, and the answer is yes. Of course, you'd expect that. This pipe does carry water far more than the rest of our our storm system. And we're finding that little by little there are greater cracks, and so someday we would have to replace that pipe. We don't want to get to someday. We would like to line the pipe instead. And as you heard, we're soliciting bids, or at least quotes for that purpose, and hopefully we get some very competitive quotes. I think the Board of Managers talked about this from time to time, but more recently an email was put together, and that email was sent out to Representative Bakerberg and Senator Pratt, asking them if, considering this year with a significant state money out there, and this year with very low water levels, which are to our benefit in getting this done, could they find us some money? We don't know exactly what the amount of money is. We won't know until the bids come in, but we think we've covered it in what we've requested. We may not get 100%. It may be a 50-50 deal, but anything that helps us to get this done at this time with the low water levels could be very, very, very beneficial. Joni and I and Andy from the city happened to go down to St. Paul and chat with both of those folks. And they were very amenable, but I think they were also very realistic. I think Senator Pratt indicated that it is not real likely we're going to get 2023 money for this. 2024, perhaps. He didn't wipe that out totally, but I had a sense he was kind of preparing us a little bit. Representative Bakerberg, to me, was a little more optimistic, I felt. But, you know, this is in 15 minutes worth or 20 minutes worth of interview. So we have that request out there. I'm not saying the amount because we like to get some competitive bids as opposed to some crazy number I might generate. We're very hopeful, and this is a great, good government project. It serves, what, 6 different public entities all at the same time, 45,000 people, millions or billions of dollars worth of property value, all kinds of public infrastructure, and it does it before the fact, not like so many public projects after the fact. So hopefully you guys are supportive of that, and I just wanted you and the public to be brought up to speed. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to get word, one way or the other. There does seem to be a possibility of second bond bill, and so if we can just do a little of this in hopes that that indeed will happen and will be included, that would be great. Joni, is there anything I've forgotten there to mention?
Vice President Boyles, I think we heard that both of the legislators understood the importance of this piece of infrastructure and felt that infrastructure is an appropriate action or activity for funding. Once again, whether we will be successful this go around, we'll see. But at a minimum, I think we have raised awareness for the issue and the importance of maintaining this pipe and trying to do it in a cost-efficient manner versus wait until it's too late and then really having to increase risk for flood and also increase costs. So I think they heard that and we're appreciative of that message.
Thank you for your efforts on this. This happened on what was it? It was like the end of the week, and she was putting in all kinds of time to try and get this prepared so we could get it, get the information, nice graphic piece, which we'll have to share with you if you haven't already. Just great efforts in order to get this done. Yeah, exactly right. Okay, next agenda item.
Could I just comment?
Yes, sir.
to it? Yeah, so again, thank you very much to all of you for the hard work with it and the expedient manner of which it's happened in an otherwise very busy season. So thank you. And I think Pete Young, when he was at the PLOC Corporators meeting,
Yes.
expressed that this is a critical infrastructure. And for us at the Watershed District, we had expressed that, yes, this is a highest priority for us to try and reduce the risk of flooding on Prior Lake. And so it is very, very important that it works. So, yes, so thank you.
Thanks for mentioning that, because we did, in a virtual phone call, talk to representatives. What was it? It was Prior Lake, us, obviously, a couple of us, Savage. I'm missing, was there Shakopee? Yeah, there was Shakopee as well, and then, of course, Pete Young. So we had a number of folks. Oh, Steve Albrecht, the SMSC, that was important.
Yep.
As well. So we were trying to use the strength of numbers and make sure that they were informed, so they weren't going, what are they asking for? So, all righty. Thanks very much. Mr. Treasurer, do you want to give us a review on the various reports contained in 501 here?
Yes, thank you. We are doing well. The general fund expenses are at about 12% of budget to date, so that's good. And the implementation fund right now is at 3%. We will get some more cash for the PLOC funds. I think it's in May we'll get that, $321,000 from the different cooperators in the agreement. You have a new copy of the 2022 budget, and we are still revising it as we still are receiving bills, including from 2021. But we're closer and closer to the final version of the budget, and also I think we are preparing for the review that's coming up here probably in this week. Is that correct?
Yes, Manager Markenberg. We are preparing for our annual audit. The auditors will be in our office Thursday and Friday. So we are still making minor modifications to the draft financial statements for 2022, still capturing some miscellaneous late invoices that relate to 2022 activity. But I think we're sitting good, and I think we're ready for the audit.
And again, Administrator Gysi is just doing a phenomenal job of keeping track of all these things, and also thanks to your good previous experience. So we very much appreciate you. This is very important that we pass the audit. And just a brief review of the budget so far from 22 is the general fund was at about 89% of the budget, and the implementation fund was 9% of the budget. Finally, our funds at the 4M Bank is currently at 2.6 million, and it matches our cash flow predictions that you can see in our cash flow chart. And again, we have successfully transitioned from our previous banks to 4M and doing all our transactions via 4M and US Bank, so that is a big accomplishment again. Well, Administrator Gysi did a phenomenal job. And I think that's about it. Do you have any further questions?
Any questions? I note that we have a fair amount of cash on hand. At the same time, I note that much of it is committed, a good half or more. And that's because we have projects that we are anticipating down the road, and we have to set money aside for it. It's not like we can just pull out a check and write it. That's the basis.
That's
right? In
correct.
case someone looks at that and goes, geez, that's
Yep.
a lot of money.
No, that's correct. So we have 1.3 million in restricted funds, and those are things like permits. It's the PLOC, so the Prior Lake Outlet Channel. It both has a contingency reserve and a general fund. It's our alum reserve that we are building up for future alum treatments on probably on Upper Prior Lake and other lakes potentially. And we have also a debt payment, small debt payment reserve.
Very good. I just thought maybe answer those questions if someone might have them. Okay, very good. Thanks for the report. We don't have to approve that or receive it or anything like that, correct? Nope? Okay. Next item is consent agenda. These are items that are handled as one item. There are 5 items on consent agenda. The first 2 are meeting minutes, one for February 14, 2023 board workshop. Second one is minutes, February 14, 2023 board meeting. Next item is a claim listing and visa expenditure summaries. The 5th is CLA, Master Service Agreement, that's our accounting firm, and statement of work. And then finally, a letter of support for Scott Scott SWCD grant application. Does anyone want to pull any of those items off consent, or is there a motion to adopt it as submitted?
Motion to adopt it as submitted.
Thank you.
Second?
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That passes 3-0. Hey, this 3-person deal is pretty good. All righty, I'm supposed to do the upcoming meetings real quick? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. Lake Friendly Farm Certificate Award event is coming up tomorrow, as a matter of fact, Wednesday, March 15th, 12 noon at Ridges of Sand Creek. This is our opportunity to recognize folks in the agricultural business who are doing some pretty innovative things to help our ecology, basically, and to help the watershed and the efforts we are taking. And of course, their lives depend on it because they're feeding their family, et cetera. So it's a great event. CAC meeting, that's the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, Thursday, March 30th, pardon me, 6:30 p.m. In Wagon Bridge Conference Room, and that's way downstairs. We have then our April meetings, Board of Manager Workshop, Tuesday, April 11, 4 p.m., right across the way here in Parkview. And finally, our Board of Managers meetings, same date, Tuesday, April 11, 6 p.m., right here in these City Council chambers. That is the last item I see on our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn unless the staff has anything else? No? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay. And no discussion, I'm guessing. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Good night. Thanks for joining us.